Hello, my name is Lamek Otieno. I am from Kenya. I'm also a student at Microverse in the very first module, which is also known as the portal. At the portal, we learn HTML, CSS, and I've come at the very end of it where I've done my capstone project. And in this presentation, I'm going to present that capstone project and also a small coding challenge. Stay tuned and welcome. Now, let us take a look at what I've built for this capstone project. I'm going to share my screen. And when I share my screen, you're going to see this particular design. This design is by an author known as Cindy Shin. You can find it at this particular URL. This design was provided as part of the project requirements, and I'm supposed to stick by it and develop a page that looks almost like this particular page. We also have to maintain the theme. It's a conference page. That's the theme, and I have to personalize the contents. So, and that is why I decided to build a page known as Biotech Summit, which is a landing page for this particular summit. They discuss biotech as a topic. And as you can see, it talks about an upcoming event. And this particular event is going to be held in October in a particular city, which is known as Nairobi City, which is my capital city. So this being a project requirement, that is why I've decided to build Biotech Summit. Another reason why I've chosen to go with this particular topic is because that this particular page can be adapted to be any other topic, like anything related to biotech or just any other kind of conference. You can use the same code, but just change the content and you're good to go. And that is why I was motivated to come up with this simple page that can talk about any upcoming conference. Yeah, that's it. From here, I'm going to show you the file structure for this particular project. When you take a look, we have the .git, and then we have workflows directory, and we have linters.yml. That is the setup for linters. Linters help me check the code and get to ensure that I code according to standards or industry standards. My assets folder has all the images that you're going to see on that particular web page. And then we have node modules. Node modules, this directory contains everything that is getting node that I'm not supposed to push to GitHub. And then we have the about.html, which is the about page for that particular conference page, the index, which is the landing page. And then we have index.js, where I have code for the interactivity of that particular web page. And we also have the CSS for desktop and also for mobile. So that is the directory tour for this particular project. Now let me show you the project and also the project requirements that I had to implement. I'm going to take you to my pull requests for this particular project where I have listed down all the project requirements that I was supposed to implement. The first one, I already talked about it, personalize the content of the page. I believe the content of this particular page is personalized and it doesn't look like the content that we have on the design that was provided. The content is different. And the next project requirements is I have to use the same colors, the typography, the layout, and I believe I've used the same colors that we have on the provided design. So that one is good to go. The page should look almost identical to the original design. I believe that's the case. Almost identical. When you look at that particular homepage and this particular homepage, they're almost identical. Then this is an open-ended one. You can choose to use a framework for styling, but I decided to go pure CSS on this particular project. And we must have two pages. That is the home page, which is this one, and also the about page, which can be accessed by clicking on this link, the about page link. The next particular requirement is we must have two versions. For mobile is up to 768, and then beyond 768 is considered beyond mobile, or like tablet and desktop should have the same design. So let us verify that. We'll just inspect the page. So this is for 768 and below it should be for small mobile screens, and it looks like this. You can also navigate to the about page. It looks like this. on 768 and below. We can also look at 425, looks like that. We can look at 375, should be the least. It looks like this. What about beyond 768, which is 769? So the page should be different. So we have two screens. We have obeyed that particular rule for 768 and 768 or wider. And then interactions, we have links. The home page should have a link in the menu to the about page. We've already seen that. The logo in the header links to the home page. Now, for example, if we were at the about page, which is this one, the logo should take us back to the home page, which it does. And then the next interaction is that the mobile menu, when the user clicks or tap the hamburger button on the header, the mobile menu appears over the page. Let us verify that. Let us click on the hamburger. Yes, the mobile menu appears on the page. There are no guidelines for mobile menu in the docs, but you should implement it so it is consistent with the design, colors, typos. So it looks like this. It has the same colors that we have on the design to base that particular project requirement. And then the mobile menu should have a close button, which we've already seen is here. And then lastly, we have dynamic page. Dynamic in the sense that particular parts of this page should only be loaded dynamically or by using JavaScript. We don't hard code that information. And the advantage of that is that if, for example, the featured speakers part, if you wanted to add more speakers, instead of coming to HTML and hard coding these speakers, you just go to the array object in the JS code and add more speakers as much as you wish, and they will automatically be populated on page load. So we have to do that for the featured speakers. And the requirement is that we should use the JavaScript variable with the data about the speakers and use it when the page loads to create the HTML. So that particular requirement has been implemented in code. As you can see, we have the speakers data, yeah. And then this speakers data is used down here to populate that particular part. As you can see, this for loop, it creates the HTML for every speaker in that array called speakers data. So that one has been implemented using JavaScript. And that's it about this particular project. That's all there is to show about it. We have the homepage, which shows information about the event and the main program about the event. And we have featured speakers, the speakers whom we expect to come and grace the event, and those are partnering with us, and also further information in the about page. And next, let me take you through the code base. For that, we'll have to go to VS Code where I have the project open. First off, let us look at the HTML code. Number one rule was that we have to write semantic HTML. Semantic HTML simply means that we have to use meaningful tags. Tag should be used for meaningful information or should be used to display whatever relevant content that it is supposed to display on the page. So when you look at my index.html, you're going to see I have tags like the header, I have divs, I have nav. For displaying relevant information on the page, I have the main tag to tell the browser that now this is the main section where we have the content, the real content of the page. Now, if you go back to the header, you can see I have a div for my top bar where we have English, my page, and logout, and then the rest of the menu is in a nav tag. That is, when you look at my page, you will see the top bar has a dark background and the bottom bar has a light background. It's the same thing happening over here in my about.html. I have the same header with with the navigation, the top bar, and the bottom bar. When you look at the two pages, you also realize that I have another nav for displaying my mobile menu, and this is coded inside the first section in the main tag. It's the same case over here in the index.html file. Before we get out of here, we'd also like to look at this. I've imported the index.js file so that the interactivity that we've coded in JS can be functional in HTML. And I've also ensured that the styles are also imported in the HTML at the head section of this particular HTML document. Now that's all for HTML. Now let us take a look at CSS code. One major thing that we should know is that for CSS, we have to use what we call selectors. CSS help us style our HTML. And in HTML, one thing that we've been doing is that we've been applying classes or IDs to our elements in the HTML. For example, we have this particular section called home section. So if I wanted to style this particular section in my CSS, I have to use dot home section. That is how we select classes. We have different types of selectors in CSS. We have the element selector where I have to just write the name of the element. For example, element A for the anchor tag. So if I wanted to style all anchor tags in the same manner, I'll just select A. But if I had an anchor tag that I gave a different class name, I'll have to specifically select it using a dot notation and then the name of the class. In this particular project, I've used class selectors for the better part of it. I think everything is class selection here. And the reason for that is that I have like particular uh, elements that are sharing styles. So it would be good to just like give them one class so that I can style them in one go. For example, you can see we have something like a program title. We have several titles there and they have the same style. So it would be important to give them like a class selector so that when I give a style for one particular title, all titles will have the same style instead of giving them ID selectors, and then I'll have to style each and every one of those IDs. So that's it about CSS. Is that simple. There is nothing much to say about it. Let us take a look at some JavaScript code next. Now, in JavaScript, like I said before, this is used to give functionality to my web page. One particular part that I had explained is this particular array, this array. It contains some objects in it, and each and every object is a representation of one particular featured speaker that will be speaking at this particular event. Now, this particular data, we're using it to like automatically populate the featured speakers part in a for loop like this. So this for loop helps us to generate HTML structure that will be inserted automatically into the index.html under featured speakers section, which is not currently populated inside the HTML. It is not currently hard-coded inside the HTML. As you can see, we have section, this section, the speaker section is empty, and that's the work of this particular for loop to populate it on page load. One thing that I did in JavaScript that I'm happy about is handling event listeners. For example, I have this function called toggle active, and this one helps me in my mobile menu. Let me show this one on the page. If I inspect this page, then I go to the mobile view of it, and let me go to screen size of 375. So when I open this particular menu and then I select particular part of the page to navigate to, this particular menu has to like get closed so that I can view content on the page. So that's the work of this particular function, which is called toggle active. It plays around with this class called inactive. So when this class inactive is added to that particular element, which it is also styled here, we can look for it in active. As you can see, inactive just says display none. So inactive just removes that particular menu out of the screen, and when it's active, this particular class will not be there. And then we also have the same thing happening to our burger menu, the hamburger menu, and then we have the close icon also having the same effect. So close icon will close the menu, and selecting all these other menu items should also close the menu for us. So that's one thing that I'm proud of to have implemented using JavaScript. Now, after showing you the code, I would also like to show you what helped me write standardized code, and that is what we call linters. Now, when you look at my code base, you'll realize that I have this particular directory at the root of my repository. It's called .github, and then under it we have workflows directory. When you open workflows, you get linters.yml. Now, inside here, you're going to find jobs. Now, these linters run on pull request. and we have several jobs that are running that will be running on pull request. We have Lighthouse for checking the performance of HTML, and then WebHint for checking the HTML code, whether it is written up to standard. The same with Styleit for checking CSS and SCSS, and ESLint for checking JavaScript, and Node Checker for checking Node modules directory if it's committed. If it's committed, it will give you this particular message that is here, that it was pushed to repo. Please remove it and ensure that you git ignore it. So that's the work for that. So this one just helps me ensure that I write code that is up to industry standards, basically. So one thing that I like about linters is that I'll have to, it will give you the opportunity to correct all the mistakes that I have in my code before I push everything to GitHub. And one problem that I always have is that when I write my CSS, I always forget about things like spacing between rule sets and the number of indentation that is required when I'm writing my CSS. So when I find that my code is like that, maybe I was typing very fast and I did not realize that I'm disobeying these particular rules in styling my CSS code. So what happens is that linters will point them out. And when I run a command such like this at the root of my project, it will be able to check all my CSS files. For example, let me run this one. Now it has detected all the mistakes that I've included in that particular file. So this one always helps me to get to know what I'm doing wrong, and then I can go and correct those mistakes one after the other. But in case of CSS, I always just pass this flag called dash fix. And because these are simple mistakes, it's just going to fix them for me. For example, let me just run this one. And let us run the command again without fix to see whether there are still problems. As you can see, there are no longer problems. And when you go back to the code, we see that it has corrected for me the mistakes that I included. It has added a space for me, and it has corrected the indentation for me. So that is the help of linters for me in my development workflow. Now, after writing my code, I pushed my code to GitHub and I created a pull request. And I'd like to show you what a descriptive pull request would look like. I'll take you to GitHub. And I have my pull request open already, and it's ready for review. I've listed my learning objectives so that the code reviewer will get to know what we're trying to achieve. And if there is anything that I'm not doing right in code, they'll be able to point out and get to correct me accordingly. Now, the project requirements that I was supposed to implement are also here. We had taken a look at them, and this is the title of my pull request. So I believe this pull request is professional enough. And that's it for the first part of this presentation. I believe you enjoyed taking a look at the Capstone project and everything that I've done in it. Next, we shall take a look at solving a simple code challenge. My coding challenge is hosted on GitHub Classrooms. Whatever you're seeing on the page is the coding challenge. It is a sum all odd Fibonacci numbers. Now, the challenge is interested in the sum of all Fibonacci numbers that are odd. But the Fibonacci numbers has to be generated up until none. That is, the last Fibonacci number should either be less than or equal to none. So once we get all the Fibonacci numbers within that range, we get the odd ones, and then we sum them and we return the results. So I'm going to solve this challenge locally. So I'll have to clone this to my computer, and then I'll solve it, then push to GitHub. Right now, it shows that the solution is red, like wrong, because it has not been attempted. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to git clone the challenge. Once it is done, I'll change the directory to the challenge directory, and then just clear my screen. Let me open this with code. Now, these are the tests that we are supposed to pass before we push this to GitHub. And this is where we are supposed to write the solution. And now let me take you through the thought process that I have to solving this particular code challenge. Now, I'll need to have like an object, like an array, where I'm going to store all my Fibonacci numbers. So I'll just say fib array, and I'll initialize it to 1 and 1. Why? Because the first two Fibonacci numbers are always 1 and 1. And I'll also need to get a variable that stores the sum of the odd Fibonacci numbers. So my initial sum is going to be 2 because 1 plus 1 is 2. I'm just adding these and these. So it means that when I generate any other Fibonacci number that is odd, I'll just add it. And then lastly, we'll have to return the sum. So those are the basic things that must be here in this particular function. Now, before I return the sum, of course, I have to do something. Now, that is the next thought process. I have to use a loop, which can be a for loop, but I think the easiest one to use should be a while loop. So the condition was, let us go back and read the condition. We can even read it here. We have a readme.md. Nice. Yeah. So they say that given a positive integer, the integer is called num, we have to return sum of all odd Fibonacci numbers that are less than or equal to num. So our function should generate Fibonacci numbers, but until the last Fibonacci number is either less than num or equal to num. So we'll have to take care of that here. So because you're working with the fib array already, we have like an object containing all the Fibonacci numbers that we are generating. So you can say fib array dot at -1, that is the last Fibonacci number in the sequence. If the last Fibonacci number is less than or equal to num, then keep on running this loop while creating for us the next Fibonacci number and also increasing the sum. So we need to do those two things inside this particular loop. So let us see how we're going to do it. First, we create the next Fibonacci number. So we just say let next fib. So next fib should be equal to fib array dot at. Check the last Fibonacci number, because we know that in our Fibonacci sequence, the next Fibonacci sequence should be the sum of the previous two Fibonacci numbers. So it should be plus fib array dot add, and then we get the second last number. So this is the last and the second last. -1 stands for the last and the second last. So we have our next Fibonacci number. We have to increase the sum. But increasing the sum, well, no, we don't need a let. We just need to increase the sum. We can do plus equals, but there is a condition. If you go back to the README, there's a condition that we can only sum if the Fibonacci number is equal to or less than num. So we have to satisfy that condition before we move ahead. So let us first do that. The number that we are currently adding is the next fib. If next fib, the one that we just generated here in line 5. So if next fib is less than or equal to num, that is one condition. Then the next condition is that this next fib must be odd. So we can say and next fib modulo 2 is not equal to 0. So if it satisfies those conditions, then you're going to add it. So that is what we are checking. Then if those conditions, the two conditions, if they're true, then add next fib. If they're not, add nothing, and we're done with this. So that one adds that. But the last thing that we need to do is to update our array. So we're going to say fib array dot push. Dot push what? We're going to push the next fib so that we get to populate our array and work with it as we continue the increment of this particular sum. So right now, I think our function should be good to go. Let us try it out here. Of course, we're just going to run npm test, but before that, I remember I just cloned this particular repository, but I have not installed this package that we have, the mocha package, this one here, the dependency. So we have to run npm install first, install. So once that is installed, then we can now run the tests. Good. So we can do npm test and see if we are correct. Good. So all the tests pass. And until this point, I think we're now ready to push to GitHub and see where they're going to pass on GitHub. So let me just run you through the solution one more time before we push to GitHub. So first, we have our initial Fibonacci numbers and our initial sum. And we have a loop that runs only if the last Fibonacci number is less than or equal to the number, the argument that is going to be passed to this function. Now we are getting the next fib, which is just the sum of the last two values in the fib array. And then our sum, we only add when with this particular condition that the next fib that we've gotten up here is less than or equal to none, and the next fib is also an odd number. So if it satisfies these two conditions, then sum plus equals to next fib. If it doesn't, we add 0. And then we also need to update our fib array before the next iteration. And then when the iteration is done, we return our sum, and that's all. So here we need to push this to GitHub. Status, we have something to push, and then just git add everything, and then say git commit, and then we say add solution, commit, and then we just git push. So we've git pushed. We can now verify if this particular function works successfully on GitHub. And that will have to take some seconds before it is verified. It looks like all the checks have passed. The auto greeting, add solution, as you can see, our latest commit has passed all the requirements for this particular test, and we're now good to go. And now to wrap up, I would just like to talk about the skills that enabled me to work on this project alone. They say that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So number one thing that I did is that I took down pen and paper. I wrote what is expected of me in this particular capstone project. I realized that there are some concepts that I was not familiar with. So number one thing is that I had to look for resources and read. And next, I had to look at the provided design and then interpret it. I had to draw it on paper and get to understand what particular elements I get to place where on that. So that is one skill that will help me in translating the design into code. The other thing is Googling. Any concept that I don't understand, I just go to Google, and I just have to use the right terms. For example, if I could just maybe show you, uh, I did not understand how to toggle classes with JS because I've only learned pure HTML and CSS. So this is something that was new to me. I could do something like that with CSS, but I never knew how to do it with JS. So when you Google, for example, this is not really Google. I like using this is Microsoft Bing. Let us see if we could use google.com. So you see a number of results are going to pop up. But for learning web technologies, there are some sites that I've trusted in my learning journey. Number one is W3 Schools, and then we have MDN, that is Mozilla Developer Network. It's down here. So they always give me like very concrete answers to my questions. But that one doesn't mean that the rest of these are bad. I always like click on them and read. But for me to get trusted information, I have to visit MDN and W3 Schools for my answers. So I opened this particularly, and then I had to go through this documentation and understand how to toggle classes and how it works in the background, yeah, and how to work with event listeners. So this was my number one resource. And then the other one that I also read is W3 Schools, which should be here, this one. So this one helped me in implementing the mobile menu, because mobile menu had got some tricky parts where I had to click on a menu item and then the mobile menu should disappear. I had to click on the close button and then it should disappear. Now those are things that I did not understand, but the skill of Googling really brought me closer to getting the solution that I needed. Something simple like class list dot toggle really helped me a lot in ensuring that I could hide my navigation bar in the mobile menu. Thank you so much for being part of this presentation. Actually, I really appreciate your time and all the best. Bye.